Grounds Committee. Regular meeting Tuesday, June 29th, 2014 at 6:04. All right. Let's do this real quick. Let's just stand for the pledge. Jim, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, next on the agenda is adoption of the agenda with the changes of adding minutes from April 14, building and grounds. Other than that, I think it would be okay, so we could approve that. Have a motion?
I'll make a motion to the regular meeting of the Buildings and Grounds Committee, called by the order of the chairman and mayor.
The minutes? That's just,
To approve the minutes of April 2014,
Yep.
regular meeting.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any difference? All right, let's move on. No special orders.
Did you get
Question.
the adoption of the agenda, Joe?
Yeah, I'm going back right now. Did I go back, did I miss something?
Yes, sir, you missed it.
He was trying to do the
How's it
agenda,
going?
but then he made him do the minutes.
Yeah. You good now?
I did 1 and 3 and skipped 2. Do you want me to do 2
No,
too?
you're only one.
Is that a 2-2?
Yeah, you do. All right. Any request to be on the agenda? Nada? All right, we'll move on. Public comments. Any public comments? Public comments, any public comments? Okay, none, close that, move on to new business. At this time, I'd like to ask Chief Nelson to give us a brief rundown on the Bridgeport Township Fire Department implementation. You could, please. If there's any questions while he's doing this, please.
No, that's okay, I'm just
let's
looking,
talk.
just real quick.
Okay. That's what we're here to do, break it down.
You want us to say this at the end or during?
You know, if you want to interrupt and do it while we're going, I'm okay with it.
Mhm.
I just want to make sure that we're all clear, so we know what we need to do to pass on to the board or our recommendation. Okay. And that's outside too. If anybody has a comment or a question, yeah, let's talk, okay? Please. Sure, sir.
Okay, just historical perspective, from a public safety standpoint, the fire department has attempted twice, back in '97 and then just a few years ago, to obtain some sort of millage to support the fire department, unsuccessfully. We need to do that again, and it's why we're here, part of why we're here today. In the past, we've requested funding that included trying to help resolve our staffing issues, specifically our daytime staffing issue. This time, we are not doing that. This time, we are focusing only on maintaining what we have, period. So it's about our building, it's about our fire apparatus, and it's about the equipment that we use to do our job. That's it. There's no staffing involved in this millage request whatsoever. So I want to make sure I put that to rest, because there are rumors that we want to go out and hire a bunch of people again, and that's just simply not the case.
Just for clarification, that's an assessment, you said?
Assessment, yes, I'm sorry. Previous was the millage. That included staffing, and now this request is strictly to maintain what we have.
Okay.
And one of the reasons we're doing that is because that's the message we heard loud and clear last time when we tried to pass the millage a couple years ago, was that we just needed to focus on maintaining our operation, not enhancing it. And so that's what we're doing today, or this time. You've been given a lot of information.
Yes.
And one of the things you've been given is a schedule that shows apparatus costs over the life of the millage, 10-year millage. You've given a line item that shows what we would need annually for equipment. And you've been given a line that shows what we would need to completely renovate our building. You've been given a second sheet with the same data, with the exception of a line item that shows the annual cost if we were to build a new building versus renovate what we have today. It's the only difference between the two, other than the amounts. If we were to renovate the building, we would need an estimated $190,000 a year, which would be a $45 assessment per parcel. If the decision was not to make any further investment in the current building and go on to a new building, we would need $55 per parcel per year for the 10 years. This only gets us to the 10-year mark. Our fire apparatus lasts 20, 25, 30, maybe even a little bit longer, depending on the apparatus and its use. This only gets us to that 10-year mark. So when we're looking at a building, we need to think beyond that 10 years. We would have to look at getting that millage renewed at some point.
Pat, are you talking with a new facility at a new site, or a new
Yeah.
facility at the site that is existing?
No, new facility at a new site.
Thank you.
Unless we were to do something with the entire complex that involved maybe a DPW building or something like that, then, you know, that's a wild card that we haven't even really touched on to date. But certainly is,
Okay.
could be part of a future discussion.
Okay.
Isn't building on the same site as vacation?
I'm sorry?
Building on the same site because of the floodplain?
Yeah, the floodplain's a big issue for us. When, in '86, there was approximately 3 feet of water that came through the station. A new building built in the floodplain, you would put in, I forget what they're called, what Ron called them, I want to say a floodgate, but it allows water to flow underneath and through the building. With as much water as we had in '86, they would virtually be ineffective. They're not meant for that, designed for that level of flooding. So those are the two primary sheets you have that just give you the total annual amount. We've also been given an apparatus schedule. And one of the things that we've talked about doing for several years, that long-term would be a tremendous benefit to us, is downsizing our fleet. To do that, we would actually sell 2 vehicles and purchase 1 new one. That would take us then out another 25 to 30 years before that vehicle would have to be replaced. To do that, we would need about $53,000 a year for that 10-year period. That's based on financing that vehicle over a 10-year period of time. Everything I've given you, by the way, is a worst-case scenario. Already in performing some additional research on replacing that apparatus, we can bring that the cost of that new apparatus down almost $100,000. Okay? So we would lower that somewhere in the area down from $53,000 to possibly $43,000 a year for that payment, if we finance that amount. This is all based on us not taking anything out of fund balance, not taking anything out of reserve. This is, in the case of apparatus, it's selling 2 pieces of apparatus, taking the proceeds from that, making the down payment, and then financing the entire amount from there. If we decided to take some money out of reserves to help fund this, then these costs go down. But those are variables that we would have to discuss at that point in time, based on our financial condition. All right? So again, everything's based on worst-case scenario. This shows utility 7, which is the pickup truck. Squad 1 is the Suburban. We would keep one of the ladder trucks, and at some point we would have to decide whether to replace it or refurbish it, which is an option. The brush truck, which is the Humvee, and engine 9, which is our plain Jane fire engine that is already 9 years old. And it shows it's starting that replacement in 2020. Now, when we look at our vehicles, by the way, we look at setting a goal for replacing that piece of apparatus. So we show that Squad 1 would be replaced in 2017. That's not necessarily the case. We always evaluate the condition of the vehicle. Our previous rescue truck was the yellow box, like utility vehicle. And that was originally due to be replaced at 10 years. We kept that vehicle for 15 years. So we ran that vehicle until we really began to have problems with it, made a decision that it absolutely needed to be replaced. Okay? So just because we place it on the schedule of 2017, we may evaluate it and determine that we're going to continue using it for another year, maybe even another year after that. We do the same thing with all of our equipment. We look at a schedule of when we think it needs to be replaced, but every single year Rose gets an updated schedule and it shows whether I've moved that equipment out. Okay? So I may have something in 2015 that says we need to replace it. As we're working through the budget in 2014, I evaluate that equipment. If it doesn't need to be replaced in 2015, the equipment schedule gets updated and we move it out maybe a year or two. Okay? So just because we put it on the schedule doesn't mean we do it.
So what we're talking about now then is this is going to apply regardless of whether the present station is renovated?
Well, I'm talking about apparatus right now.
I understand that.
Okay.
We've got two choices presented. The existing building renovation or building a new station. Okay. And then we're talking about apparatus. Now, when you requested a dollar amount, $45 or $55 per year, is the 45 renovation and the apparatus?
Yes, that's everything. That's
Okay,
equipment,
then the
apparatus.
other one, the 55, is the new building and the apparatus?
And equipment.
Okay.
It's everything. And that's what you're seeing here. You're seeing an apparatus schedule. You also have a major equipment replacement schedule. So things like our air bottles that we know in 2018 must all be replaced, about $60,000. Now, we're going to continue to write grants. We did not get the grant this year. Okay, but we also know why. We've had somebody from FEMA actually review that grant and indicated we have a very strong grant, and she thinks we'll be a great candidate in subsequent years. I'm confident that we'll likely see a grant for that before 2018. But those bottles, regardless, they're regulated by OSHA and the DOT. And whether we like it or not, they have a 15-year life, and they're taken out of service. You have no choice. You cannot extend their life past 15 years. Some of our masks. You'll see other equipment here on the list. And again, we look at this. So for instance, in 2016, I show that we have a vent saw. It's a fancy chainsaw that's meant for cutting through roofs. That I show we need to replace one in 2016 and one in 2017. What we do is towards the budget, when we're budgeting in 2015, is we'll have those saws evaluated by a vendor. And if they're still in great condition and they're still serviceable, we'll simply move that out. So that those two saws might go out to be reevaluated for 2017 and 2018. But on this list is everything, major equipment that we use that at some point must be replaced. And it shows you the projected year and the amount that would be needed to do that. This does not take into account, again, thinking about grants. We'll always apply for them, but there's no guarantee we will get them.
If you were to get the 45 or the $55,
The $45 is based on renovating the current building, which will be the next topic.
yep.
The
But if you-
55 is the new building.
If you were to get either one of those, and then you were to get a grant, how would that money then, from grant money, apply back to the taxpayers from the 45 or the 55 that they have put into the project?
Great question. So I'm gonna take you back now to, I'm gonna look at the schedule based on renovation of the existing station. So we've said here that we need $45 to do all this stuff, right? So if you look at in 2023, when this needs to be renewed, if we spent all this money, we would actually, in 2023, have to find $1,535. The 45 isn't enough to completely pay for everything, okay? But let's say we got a grant for the 60,000 for the air bottles and the air packs, okay? So we didn't have any of those expenditures. There's 60, 92, there's almost $100,000 worth of equipment there. The board every year has to set the rate for that assessment. So the board then would determine whether or not to assess the 45, or you might get a new projection from me and only assess 40 then.
Okay. Good. So you do have a plan that if we get some grants to give the money, not take the money?
You folks would have to make that decision.
Yes, sir. Perfect.
You might make the decision, well, we have a potential issue with another piece of equipment, so we need to bank a little bit of that money, so we're gonna charge it for next year, but maybe the following year not.
Okay.
That's completely up to the board.
Good, thank you.
I give this update to Rose annually. She gets us updated sheets.
And that's one of the nice things about an assessment as opposed to a millage. With an assessment, as we go down the road, the economy changes, we get more money, we get grants and those kind of things. Each year, we have to vote on carrying forth with X number of dollars. If we are able to get grants and that kind of stuff, we can reduce it. Let's say it's 45. We can reduce it, like I said, to 40, 35. Well, then the following year, if something happens where we determine we need more money, we can bump that up to within, well, we can go 10% over in any given year. But you can always, and I know most people wouldn't believe that any government's going to reduce that amount, but we would. Where a millage is, you set the millage, and that's what it is, regardless.
And one of the issues that we have here is because of our, well, that's not time constraint, we have purchasing guidelines we have to follow. So when we talk about the apparatus, we budgeted that at $650,000. I can't go out for formal bids, but I can have informal discussions and see what's going on out in the industry and what these trucks are selling for. And what we're finding is we can probably bring that truck in here ready to go, complete, for around $565, $550 right in there. So we know that I know today if I went out for formal bid, I can lower that amount drastically, okay? But until we go out for formal bid, it's difficult for me to guarantee that price. So I've got to look at worst case for you, okay? Competitive bid would definitely bring that cost down. I just can't guarantee the amount. Okay, so that's the equipment list. Any questions on the apparatus or equipment list so far before we go to building? Do you have any questions on anything that's listed here that it's not clear enough what it is or why we need it or anything? The fire apparatus also is based on our ISO rating, on what we need for pump capacity, for what we need for water capacity. All of those things are included. Okay? Unless we went in our area to some sort of fire district where apparatus was truly shared, we can't get away from that. Not everybody is impacted by ISO, and we have a complete section on ISO on our website, fire department website, but not everybody is impacted by it. The commercial district more so than residential, but a lot of people are. Most insurers follow it, not all, but most of them. One of the things that you've been given is a very brief, just to finish up apparatus. You were also given an apparatus replacement projections.
Yep.
That shows what a new truck is versus, okay. Do you have any questions on that? The building, when we talk about the renovation, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. The electrical system is well undersized. That generator is so small that it's supposed to run our building and the DPW. We cannot run everything in our building during a power outage. The generator was undersized. We had an old one that was a military surplus type generator, and it was damaged. And the insurance company would only give us so much, And the manager at the time only allowed us to spend what we get for the insurance. So the chief at the time bought what he could. The generator's undersized. The electrical system is only 150 amp service coming into that building. We can't really add anything to it. It's been very troublesome for us. We really need to have consumers come out and put in a new transformer, update the panels, and do that electrical work, and it's very expensive. It's about $135,000. But a lot of that's consumers' work as well. The structural repairs, things like the apparatus floor we've talked about many times, the overhead doors, structural repairs, which also includes the back apron out back, the apparatus drives on. The hose tower needs to be brought down to the level of the roof. This is going on in James Township right now. When they built the hose tower, back then it was built to code, but there was really very little reinforcement inside that block, and there's a crack all the way around the inside of that. Saginaw Township has had 2 of theirs taken down. James Township is having 1 of theirs taken down right now. And ours, at some point, it's going to have to come down, regardless of whether we occupy that building. If that building's still standing, at some point, we're going to have to take part of that hose tower down, or it's going to become a hazard.
If the people opted for a new facility at a new site, have you got anything in there for what it would cost to demo what's existing?
No, because I don't know whether that building would get repurposed for something else, or if it would just get demoed. I don't know that question. I can't answer that.
Okay.
But currently, that building's grandfathered in, so once we do demo it, the chances of rebuilding there with insurance in the floodplain would be,
Yeah, the floodplain will be an issue for us. The floodplain's an issue for us even with getting grants to modify that building. We have to go through an entire slew of documentation because it's in the floodplain. It's very, very lengthy to get a grant, try and get a grant approved for that, for anything for that building.
But at the bare minimum, even if you build a brand new site, the hose tower would have to come down at some point.
Yes, at least to the roof level is what they would do. So you can still use that portion of the building for storage or other things, but it would just be brought down to just above the roof level. Our siren, we'd have to remount that on some sort of pole. That's what James Township and others have done. So there's cost involved in that. The rear apron on the back corner of the building, and many of you have come through the building and looked at it, but it's sinking. They don't know whether that's caused from back when we had the fuel tanks out there, when they removed those. Was something missed? They don't know. But that needs to be replaced. There's also an option in there, if we were to keep this building, down to the very last one, would be to take the lot where we have the little house across the street we use for training, and put some sort of pole building there that we could use for training and for storage. One of the issues we have is storage. And I don't have a firm number. I put a number of 75,000. I don't know what kind of site work might have to be done, so again, was worst case.
So if you're gonna reduce, if you stay in the structure you're in, you're gonna reduce, you're gonna have 1 less truck
Yes,
than you have now.
yes.
So would you still be required to need more storage space with that truck on?
Yes. Yeah, they're just, the only space we even have for rack storage is over on that wall. We would want to use an open bay for rack storage. We have to pull a truck out now to do, when we do SCBA refurbishing and equipment, work on equipment, we have to pull an apparatus out, set up tables in order to do that work.
it's extremely tight in there.
Yeah, so what we would do is, that space, likely on the far wall, like where the Humvee is, that space would become that area permanently. But then storage still becomes an issue. It's still an issue,
Those are just some of the questions that people are gonna want
Yes.
answers for, and that's why I'm asking.
yes.
A lot of stuff hung up in the woman's yard right now.
You bet.
Mm-hmm.
And we took the old shower and converted that to our turnout gear storage, which is great. It's working out very, very well. But we put the space to use. Part of this is updating the HVAC system, which today is very expensive for us. We'll spend $1,000+ in the winter a month just heating that building because of that big boiler. The boiler was sized In 1980, when they built the building, they had planned on, at some point, expanding out, adding on to each side. And in 1986, they actually hired an architect to come in and design that. We actually still have those plans. Well, it never came to fruition. And then the Historical Society was built, and then we have the issue with the boulevard and all the underground utilities. So we really can't go out now, or we could, but very, very expensive. It wouldn't be cost effective to add on to the station at this point. You couldn't connect the two buildings because of the condition of this one. They wouldn't want to actually physically connect them from the engineering study, because that would cause an issue if the new section started to settle. Then what would happen structurally to the one we have? So it could cause a lot of big problems for us. But they meant to go out both sides. So when they bought the boiler and had it installed, they bought one big enough to facilitate that. Well, it never happened. So we've got this huge boiler that's way oversized, and it's expensive to run, very expensive.
Too bad it couldn't generate power.
Yeah, it's too bad. Yeah, but the HVAC isn't as bad as I thought it would be. It's about $26,000. That includes dismantling the existing boiler. So. You've been given the engineer's report. We actually had Snyder and Staley come out and look at the building. And you can see the recommendations there. They would not, one of the recommendations where we have a large separation at the front wall from the floor of the building is not to repair it, but rather to stop it from getting worse. That's really what they've said about all they can really cost effectively do with that problem.
Says you're gonna caulk it. No, I'm just kidding.
Well,
That crack's a little big for caulk.
yeah, just a little bit. Some of these items, the brick veneer, if we don't do something with that building, even if it was going to be repurposed, some of this has to get done. We're going to have some failures. We're going to get moisture in between the brick and the wall, and our problems are going to become much, much worse. So regardless, some of this stuff needs to be done no matter what. The estimate to completely renovate that building is just under $600,000.
That including the storage facility?
Yes. And again, we didn't do formal bid requests. We had mechanical contractors came in. They gave us a quote, but this is not our formal bid process. So a formal bid process may very well, if they know we're serious about having the work done, may very well bring those costs down. Some of it, the lighting, is $10,208. We can pay that back in 4 years, just in the savings. Those metal halide lights that we use in our apparatus bays, extremely expensive to run. It's why when you come in there during the day, we only have one row on. We keep the others off unless we're working there, because they're really expensive to operate. But changing out to LED lighting, changing out like we did here to these types of lights inside, we would actually see a payback, plus with the rebates from consumers and so on, we could actually see a payback in 4 years, just in the energy savings.
What was your total cost on the new building? You said 600,000 on the renovations.
The new building is, about 2.1 million.
And that's over 30 years.
Yeah, that's amortized at 30 years.
Yeah, that's over 30 years, and the renovation's over 10 years.
Correct.
So after 10 years, that assessment went that way, we would have to put it out for another vote
Yes.
in order to finish paying for it.
But even then, we would likely have to anyway, because engine 9 at that point will be it'll be over 20 years old. So I need to start thinking ahead of that. So even then, it likely wouldn't be the same amount, but we'd likely still need to look at it. Because even if we were to get a grant next year for the SCBA, in 10 years, we're only 5 years away from having to replace all those bottles again. So we would likely want to continue that beyond the 10 years at some level. It might be much, much less, but
Any questions from out in the audience?
Do you have a site in plan, an area in plan, for a new building?
you know, we have to kind of try and stay right within this area because of I-75. Our primary structure fire response is north, but with I-75 and the crashes we get at Curtis, so we don't want to delay that response. So we really kind of need to stay fairly close to where we're at.
On that same, now the building, going to with a new structure, that's including just the fire, or is that also, what else will be at that?
Now, the building is designed as, it's a modular design, so it would depend on the site. We designed it, and actually we did a large feasibility study 2004 that incorporated law enforcement, even MSP at the time, even incorporated, looked at moving our 911 center and our emergency operations center into an emergency services complex. So we did this formal study. All of us chipped in and did it together. And a needs assessment. And ultimately, we didn't do the EOC, got part of the courthouse, and they took that assessment and put it in place, so did 911, but ultimately decided not to build a new facility. Looking at regionalization, okay, which is going to come in a lot of areas, whether we like it or not. But from our standpoint, we designed it so that it has a common lobby. So our hope was that we could add on the police department, but you would still come in one main entrance. That the reception area where the person would sit that says, "What can I do for you today?" would facilitate both. So that would be a shared person that would meet that, okay? And then that person would simply direct you into the police department or into the fire department, okay, or wherever you needed to go. The building's designed so that if we were to add a police department on, locker rooms, weight rooms, kitchen, all those things could be shared automatically. Okay, we intentionally designed it like that. The other thing we did was we looked at the training room and we designed that so that it could have external public access, so it could become a community center, it could become the senior center, okay, as well. It's going to depend on if we took the route of building a new facility, it would depend on what site would dictate whether we have room for that or not. Okay, but that's really the optimum, is to look at that. If you wanted to add on the police department based on that needs assessment, you'd be adding probably $1 million to it. And I say that because theirs would be less because you're not building additional bathrooms and additional handicap access and an additional kitchen, additional break room. All those things are shared. So you're adding their office space, their interview room, their prisoner retention area, the things, those other things that they need, their weapons storage, that type of stuff. You're not, the rest of that's already there. So much less to add them onto that facility than it would be to build their own building somewhere else.
Similar to what Buena Vista did, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Except in BV, you can enter the police department separate than the fire. In this, you'd come into one common lobby. You'd be directed into either one. So again, saving materials, saving building costs. The phone system, all that becomes common, like it is today. Conference room could be common, those kinds of things. That 2.1 does not include the land purchase. When we initially set aside the reserve for the fire department, the first $100,000 that was put into that, that's exactly what it was put in there for, was land acquisition at some point. But that's what prompted that whole thing to occur, was the potential for land acquisition.
Do we have any sites that are buildable that we already currently own?
The DDA has the property next to the post office. We would have to reevaluate that because if you look, it slopes pretty far back. So that, I don't know what kind of cost issues that would create for us. That might cause us to go up, cheaper to build to go up, but then are we going to have an elevator? If the second floor has to be accessible to the public and it has to be handicap accessible, we will have to have an elevator. What does that do to the cost? But certainly going up is cheaper than going out. The new building was designed to have a partial basement that would be accessed by both. So for instance, it would be much more secure than having a first floor for weapons storage for the police department and so on. But it would only be accessible by employees, so it doesn't have to have an elevator, as long as it's under a certain square footage. So we also built that into the new design. Dave Schmiegel and I actually took a couple of days, and we drove around the state back in 08, and looked at buildings that had been built within 2 years. Took pictures, came back and said, okay, what would we do? For instance, a lot of facilities build men's locker rooms and women's locker rooms. We didn't do that. We have a common locker area, but then the bathrooms are dedicated. So there's a bathroom with a complete changing area, everything inside of it, that's dedicated for a female. It can also be handicap accessible. And then there is the male changing rooms with a shower and a bathroom, so that you don't have to have separate locker rooms. You have one common locker room area. Reduces the cost quite a bit. So we looked at all these different designs, and we actually put together the elevation. We have the drawings today on the new building. It'd be smaller than what we had originally planned, but
Basically, what you're referencing now is with the 2004, when all that was done.
yes. Yeah.
Isn't that where you got your ideas for the senior citizen center?
Yeah.
And I thought you were telling me that about a year and a half ago, that by going out and seeing the other facilities, you saw where it was a center for the public.
Yeah, I don't remember if it was Muskegon. I remember it was on the west side of the state, but one of the communities had happened to them what happened to us. They lost their senior center. The building was no longer habitable. They didn't have any place for a senior center. So when they built the new fire station, that's what prompted them to create this training room that was also a community room. So the kitchen was accessible to everybody, employees, and then anybody that's using that room. But the doors, the access doors that came from the kitchen into the facility are key fobs, so only employees can get in. Okay? Saved a ton of money because they didn't have to build a separate senior center with a separate kitchen and all those things. It just became shared. There was a separate refrigerator that was dedicated for employees that was lockable, so that the public couldn't get in and out, but that kind of thing. And then there was a separate, so they had more than one refrigerator is how they solved the problem of that kind of thing. But it worked out. It was perfect. It's a great idea. They even took their weight room, and for employees had external access, and the city's employees could come in and use it instead of having a gym membership. But it was completely accessible from the outside, so they never had to come through the facility to get to it. So everything remained secure.
When was the present building built?
1972.
And if nothing happens and nothing passes, what's the very worst case scenario that everybody's looking at?
The floor is going to have to be addressed. The floor grates are going to have to be addressed. The structural repairs have to be addressed, but the building just isn't going to last at all. So we're still looking at $200,000 to $300,000, no matter what. The fire suppression system came in much less than I thought, $45,000, which I thought for sure would come in somewhere around 75. But some of those items are going to have to be done no matter what we do with that, unless we tear the building down. At some point. Now, in his report, he doesn't say that the hose tower is going to become a huge liability next year, but it could. It may be 3 years before it really becomes a huge problem, but at some point it must come down. The other thing with adding on to that building is we would have to meet the new floodplain, so the new addition would be higher than the parking lot next door at the historical society. And then we'd have to put in switchback ramps because it's accessible by the public for handicap access. You'll lose 12 feet of your building space just to put in that switchback ramp. So there just isn't enough room to go out. And if we went out the other side, we'd have to take over Mill Street, we'd have to move utilities. It would cost us about $300,000 just to break ground. Because consumers will not go underground with their utilities and then come back up to go to this building. We'd have to pay to go underground all the way back to here. They won't go underground and then back up to a pole, they said. It's a lot of money to go out to build onto Mill Street.
Any more questions? More questions?
Chief, I thought you, at the beginning, said you wanted to squelch a rumor. Do you know what that was?
Oh, no, that's why I'm here tonight.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I
Is,
thought
yeah,
you had
no,
already heard
I
something.
hadn't heard any rumors at this point, but I just wanted to get educated on what your plan is.
Darlene, did you?
I'm just joking. If, when you talked about the floor upstairs, how you'd have to secure that wall, is that like an anchor system, like a seawall? Is that what that is that holds that together? Or-
Well, there's steel joists there, but they were never connected to the wall, like they would be today. They were built, it was built to the building code in 72, but today, over years, they've learned that that system isn't proper, so the building code today would make them tie that wall in differently than they did then. And so now we have this separation, where they can't really bring the two back together.
Right.
So they would simply install some sort of system, and I don't know exactly what it is, that would just prevent it from getting worse.
And that has to be done regardless.
Yes, at some point. I'm not saying it has to be done tomorrow, but it must be done.
2 by 4s when shoved against the wall to hold it.
The problem with that building is I've talked to some of you about is that when it's built, number one, it's under constant stress from the wind. It's moving, the building's moving. That's one of the things both engineers have said, is the original one and this one, is that building's under constant movement. Then it's right on top of Dixie Highway. We don't have near the truck traffic today that we did when Nash Finch was up and running completely, but you'll have something drive by that building, and you'll feel the building move. So it really should have been turned when it was built, or built farther back. So it's under constant stress. There's days when it's windy, we have to latch the doors because it'll actually pull the back door open.
And you're estimated $2.1 million for a new building. How did you arrive at that? I know you said back in 2004 you had plans or whatever.
Well, no, '04 is when we did the needs assessment. '08 is when we
Well,
had the architect actually, based on everything we gathered from visiting other sites, actually had the architect put something together. So I looked at that quote, I looked at current commercial construction cost per square foot. I looked at what we had designed and how we could downsize that, and that's how I came to my estimate. Doesn't include land, though. Based on the couple sites that are potential, I also would not foresee any issues with core drills. I don't think they'll find anything that will cause us a problem. Our original quote, way back when we talked about, there was discussion about extending Fort Road around the Bearcat, closing off Bearcat at Dixie, and using part of the school property. And they had a lot of concerns about the soil there and what they might find underneath it. So we actually had increased the cost quite a bit based on that.
Pat, I have a question. Based on the 10-year renovation assessment, we know that after 10 years, we would have to look at another assessment for apparatus and stuff that would have to be replaced. We go 10 years on a special assessment for the new building, knowing that 10 years later, we're gonna have to go out and ask for that assessment again to cover the remaining 20 years. We're also gonna have to add extra to that for any apparatus or anything long-term down the road. So that,
That's correct, but that's the benefit to updating these annually.
the building is 30 years, it is. But he's saying, even going renovation and we go with a 10-year assessment, after those 10 years, we're gonna have to go back out for another assessment for the apparatus that's going to be aging and anything else that's gonna be aging.
So as we move the
So we're
equipment
gonna
out,
have to have it anyways. But what are we gonna do if we go with a new building after 10 years? We're gonna have to go out and ask for the new millage, or assessment, but we're gonna have to ask for over and beyond that, because we're still gonna have the apparatus and so forth that we're talking about
possibly, yes.
on top of that.
But that's the benefit to updating this every single year.
Right.
So as we're moving through here in 2020, you know that in 3 years, we have to, in 2023, we need to renew that. You've already got a picture of what that might look like.
Right, I understand. I just wanted to put that in there, make sure. Do you see what I'm saying?
That's why I was asking the
Understand.
question before,
Um,
if we're talking about X number of dollars assessment for a new building, it would include apparatus over a 30-year period. That's what I was asking.
No, I can extend this schedule out based on the projections out 30 years. I didn't do that, I only did it for the 10
So it's
initially.
30
for-
years for the building, and 10 years for
See,
the.
that's why I was asking.
So it would need to be renewed for at least what the building payment would be. You might not need to increase that for another 5 or 6 years, depending on what's on this list and how it's aging and how functional it is. Do we project that we're going to have to replace something in 2026? That's $100,000. Maybe not. If not, then it's just like today, you're going to ask, you know you have the ability to assess up to that 55 that gets approved, maybe or 10% over that, but if you only need to assess $30, then that's what you would vote to assess, based on these continued schedules. So as long as this is getting updated every single year and given to the manager and to the board, you'll have that picture well ahead of time of what's coming at you from the fire department standpoint. Other than staffing, we've left absolutely no stone unturned here. And this is turnout gear, this is everything. This does not take into account either what this would save from our current budget. So today we budget X number of sets of turnout gear a year, anywhere from 6,000 to 12,000 a year, depending on how many we have to replace. Today we replace other equipment annually through our normal budget. This doesn't take into account any savings there as well. This is worst case scenario, we don't have any extra cash anywhere, we make a purchase, we pay cash for it, or we're going to finance it.
So what happens if we say, okay, let's do the new building for 10-year assessment, and then at the end of 10 years, we go for another new assessment, and the public votes it down? What
Yes.
happens to that 20-year?
I can't see that being a good idea. Building the building, only doing this 10-year, you'd have to do the 30-year from the get-go. I mean, you wouldn't want to take that chance that 10 years from now.
The only other option on the building would be to bond it, so it'd be a whole separate issue, it would come off that assessment. Make it a
Explain
whole-
that
make
if
the-
you're talking, if you
make-
were to bond it.
Yeah.
Make the building a
Explain
whole
what you mean.
separate issue, all in and of itself. So the building would be separate from anything else we do. We'd do an assessment for apparatus and equipment. We would do something either, and I don't know if as a township we can do a bond like a city can, where it's a 10-year, and the bonds get sold, and it's based on, we have a pretty good credit rating, so the bonds would get sold just like any bond you'd go and buy. For that period of time, we would pay the interest on that bond, whatever it is. It's like you'd pay interest on a loan, but investors would be purchasing those government bonds. Some people will build a building like that. I don't know if we're allowed to, I believe we are.
Well, the
Get that
DDA
answer.
did the jump.
Yes, exactly, yep. Yeah, it's a government entity, we have the ability to do that. And that's what the DDA did, they sold bonds for that. I don't know whether that was a 20-year or 10-year, I don't remember how long those
But
were.
even with the bank, you still have to have money to pay off the bond.
Yes, yes.
So the money would still have to be there.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts,
It's
Jimmy?
probably like 20 years, it's long.
Honestly?
Yeah. We're just talking.
We've gotta come up with an approach for the people, because they're gonna vote us down again. 100% they're gonna vote us down again, and we're gonna be up against where, it almost has to be brought to them, do you wanna keep a fire department or don't you? That's my thoughts. They've turned it down every year for however many times, police and fire, that it's been on the millage. You almost have to say, either put some money into this or wash your hands of it, because we're at that point where we need some repairs done, and if they don't okay them, what are we gonna do? That's kind of my thoughts. They've turned us down over and over again, and we've discussed the reasons. You go by and look at Pat's equipment. It's shiny as a new penny. They all look at it and say, why you need something? You know, you ought to let some exhaust flow around there. So, but if it was dirty and if it was falling down, people don't see that. And they come by now and they think, well, you don't need any equipment at all. Why do you need this millage? But I don't, we're gonna get voted down again unless we can come up with a way to tell the people that we really need this, or we're gonna lose. How important is it to the people of the township to retain fire protection? And I don't know how to go about that. I mean, you
Yeah.
understand what I'm saying, Pat?
Yeah,
I'm
Rosa-
not trying to be.
No,
Well,
no,
pancake
two-
breakfast, we can
2
blow
weeks
some
ago,
food on that
two
joint.
weeks ago, I sat in Rose's office and we were talking about this. And we were talking about the police assessment and the fire assessment. And we had that exact conversation. I said, you know, it's important that we add some officers, in my opinion, as a citizen here. And that we get our police department what they need. And I've always supported that. But the reality is, if the assessment doesn't go through for the police department, the chief's gonna continue doing the best job he can. He's gonna have some police officers left. If I don't get this millage, what's gonna happen when structurally I can't occupy that building? Literally, we could go out of business. Or be severely handicapped to deliver services on the fire side. The building is just, it's a huge issue. You know, here, he's fortunate. He's got to worry about his, internally all stuff, but he doesn't have to worry about a building today. The roof will get replaced, and, you know, this building is sound now. I mean, there was a time it wasn't, but there's stuff on here, the air bottles. By 2018, they have to be replaced. That's it, end of story. There are no exceptions. Okay? At the end of 2018, those bottles are out of service per DOT.
And I'd be the
So-
first one to step up the plate. I'll give you your $55 right now, but I don't know how to go about. I'm happy to give you $155 if you want it, but I don't understand how we can get to the people and make them understand how this is right down to a critical state where we gotta fix it or we're gonna lose this department, basically.
It's huge challenges. The other thing that'll happen is if things start to fail, we start to have huge problems, like we have with one of our pieces of apparatus now, the guys, the morale changes.
Sure.
And it does. They start to feel like, you know, is my equipment safe? Am I going to have what I need to do the job, you know?
Am I gonna break down on I-75?
Am I gonna break down? Am I gonna break down on the way to a call? And it happened. That's why we finally got rid of Rescue 6. It died on the way to a cardiac call one day, and it was a big deal. So that's when I finally said, okay, enough's enough, it's gotta go. But literally, and this isn't about bodies or enhancement, where if they say, no, okay, I'll have to live without it for a while, it's stuff that's gotta be replaced at some point in time. I don't have Jaws equipment. The set of cutters that I got on a grant 4 years ago now, there's already new steel coming out in the A, B posts that those cutters struggle to cut through. I need to upgrade those cutters again. It's almost $10,000 just for the cutter. It's expensive. And then all that stuff has to be maintained, so when you look at a piece of apparatus, you gotta also have to take into account all the stuff that's on it. Just one of the ladder trucks, there's almost $60,000 worth of equipment on one truck. Some of it, now, could we downsize the fleet and just live without? Yep, insurance rates, a lot of people's insurance rates will be impacted. Then what's going to happen? They'll stand at the mic and say, what'd you do to my insurance rate? One of the challenges we face, that Jim just talked about, is how do we truly, you can't stand have this hour-long conversation with somebody. There's so much information. ISO, if you look at our website, I think it's 8 pages of information that's designed for citizens who know nothing about ISO rating. That's just one component of our operation. And trying to explain to somebody the difference between a vet saw and a K-12 saw, why we need that equipment. It's a challenge.
What's your thoughts?
I'm with Jimmy. It's the same thing. I mean, I'd give you the money right now too. But how to convey it to my neighbor without having an hour conversation with each and every one on Town Line Road, which would take me a month. I don't know.
And from the previous millage, when we had the previous millage question, and a lot of us went door to door. We learned that because we also had individuals that went door to door and were not necessarily truthful. We spent more time trying to defend what was said than we did delivering our darn message.
Right.
It was hard.
That's a
It
morale
was
killer,
really,
too.
really hard.
I do know you got issues in that building. I spent a lot of time in that building too. When you get pancake breakfast, you should leave the engine right there and tell them to pull a table off of the rack there, because you can't, there's no room. The building is falling apart, so, I mean, I don't know.
Well, and if you look at it, the first time we had meetings here, 12, 14 meetings, whatever it was, and there was, as I've said before, there was more congregation than there was, there was more choir than there was congregation.
Right.
And then we decided to go in outlying areas to the churches, and it was the same thing. There'd be 6 or 8 of us and 3 residents. We sent out postcards
Yeah.
notifying when the meetings were gonna be. I'm at a loss as to how
Well, and you know
as to
that
how you do that.
we hired Princeton and Ewing to really design a brochure that would catch attention and get the message out, and people got upset about that. So you should just put something on the front that says, this affects your property taxes. The second time around, we made them in-house. I did them. We sent them out to be printed and mailed, but I designed it. And then we did that part. So you're right, for some people, it doesn't matter what we do, we're going to be wrong, and we're not going to be truthful. We can't get past
Well, with
that.
this, the big difference with this assessment is, previously when we did the millage, you didn't have an option with an assessment like you do now. We were thinking about an assessment at that time. If you were a farmer that had 80 acres, you had to pay an assessment or pay a millage on that whole 80 acres. Now with the assessments, since they changed, they reverted back to the way they used to do it, the legislators. Now it's the house or a building on a lot. There'll not be assessment on empty lots. So that's going to be a lot less costly for some of our rural people who've got a lot of acreage and that kind of stuff. But some people think they're just, everybody else can have fire but me.
Our apparatus repairs, I have almost spent my budget for 2014 already.
At least it was a short summer. Pretty cold today.
And it's raining.
Fall was here yesterday.
Oh my gosh, horrible weather.
I don't know how we can educate people that don't want to be educated. The library is dealing with the DDA stuff now, and people are going to put out there that the DDA is going to be capturing these dollars too, and they're not capturing anything on a special assessment. I don't know how we get it out there so people understand, or make them listen.
And the same old theory doesn't work. If you let 3 houses burn down, it's still Pat and the fire department's fault. It's not the people's houses that burned down that refused to pay the $45 a year. It's still his fault that he didn't get his crew out there. People just don't understand. I mean, it's a paint X on the wall and run your head into it. There's no.
We have some people that say, well, if my house is on fire, just let it burn down because it's gone anyways, but they don't understand what they save when they save a house from burning to the ground.
What's your
People don't
thoughts, Mr.
understand
Thayer?
We have to do something here. We have a lot of senior citizens locally. And a lot of us are not.
What is the median age of Bridgeport? Is it like 46, 47?
would
I know
say
the state
I
of
would say it's
Michigan's
a little
up
bit
there.
higher
Is-
than that.
is The state of Michigan itself is like 49, I think.
Yeah, I would
We
almost
can
say
find
it's
out.
49. I would
Yeah,
say
I
it's
think it's in the, new master plan.
Do you remember what that is?
Isn't it right around?
Do you remember what that is? Was it
No,
46?
I think it's in that new master
Oh,
plan.
median age.
I thought it was
saying
less
that-
than that, but I don't know.
If,
It would be in the census also, the
that's
census.
correct.
Right.
Yes,
But
but we have to, if it was your mother or my mother that just had a heart attack or stroke and fell down the basement, we're gonna wanna do anything we can do to help that person. And the first time we don't,
My dad's 89,
We're in
and
trouble.
he makes a call, Pat better be there. That's all I gotta say.
I'm just saying that, that's,
Yeah, I know.
it's a crucial thing, and a lot of us don't, I'm game. I'll do what I have to do.
Until you need the service, you don't realize it.
See, that's where,
Experienced it personally. When my son dove into the pool and broke his neck, I experienced it personally, that how long it takes for the resources to get there and how critical they are to you. So you don't, I never thought about it until I needed the resource.
and I-
Well, myself, I think it was about 3 years ago or so, I was at the truck stop and had every indication of having a heart attack. And I was real glad to see these guys pull in as quickly as they did. Well, I should say, I wasn't really aware of what was going on, but they were there immediately. Day before that, what I thought I had an indication of having a heart attack, I didn't have to worry about that, I'm too healthy.
Wish we could get a whole group of Joey Pops to get up and say, you know what, I got a second chance because we had this. And would he give $45 a year? He'd give $45 a day for the second chance that he had. But even if they all got up and drew a line from here to the Dixie Highway, the people that are gonna vote still wouldn't hear what we've gotta tell them. So I don't know, we need to, it's always so negative when you gotta spend money, and I don't know why.
Well, if you read the latest MTA, I'm sure Pat saw that, where the legislators now are considering where a township like us, if they run out to the expressway, at the present time, Pat bills their insurance company, we bill the insurance company.
Sure.
They're trying to pass a law, change the law, so you can't do that.
Right.
Why they would do that, it's just, well, I think I know, but I'm not gonna get into politics. But,
It'll be one more revenue source that'll be gone for us.
sure, someone can campaign contributions from insurance companies probably.
We'll collect anywhere from $5,000 to as high as $11,000 in a year, depending on the number of incidents out there, so.
Darlene has a question.
Yep,
Well, I was glad that Augie said, I know that when we tried to plant some millage, that they were concerned about it not being fair, and that a lot of people were paying a lot more than another person, they still only had one structure, so that's taken care of. And I feel, I know that it's negative, and I know that there's a lot of feelings like of despair almost, but there must be a way to get it to people. There has to be a way. How many townships have fire assessments or fire millages?
Most.
Most. So obviously it's a need, you know, so how do we let the people know that we're so concerned about it not being fair, that it is fair as possibly can be at this point, and that it's needed?
In Thomas Township, and I don't know police call volume wise, but fire call volume wise are a little bit less than us. But fairly like community size wise, I think even police force might be close to the same size.
About the same size call volumes, night and day.
Yeah, okay.
We're quite a bit.
But
more.
they have a police fire millage, but then they have a separate one just for fire department capital expenditures. So they have two. One for operations, one to buy the stuff that they need.
I mean,
All right, sorry.
I want somebody to be there.
I want somebody to be there for
When something happens.
all of us.
yeah. You bet. It's same thing, I mean, law enforcement hears it all the time, you know. They don't don't hear too many complaints until they didn't have anybody on duty and somebody needed a police officer and they had to wait for a deputy or somebody for an hour or 2 hours. That's when the complaints come in and say, well, why wasn't one of your people there? Well, I don't have one.
Because you didn't pass them.
You know, suddenly it becomes important to that person. So now when the chief says, you know, I'd like to get us to this number of officers, that person might say, okay, yeah, you know what? He's right, I've experienced it, I need it. But the person that hasn't experienced might go, well, what's he need these other officers? You know, and that's what we get up against. Well, what do you need that for?
We need Jim to get on TV and talk about the shiny apparatus and explain it.
And you know when we needed a couple more police officers and we just decided to put them on? How do you go about doing that with the apparatus here, where we tried for Dave to get him a couple more, and finally we just put it to the board and said, you know what, let's hire a couple, because we need them. We need around-the-clock protection, and then we took some guff for it, no doubt about it, but how many times do you ask for you just take matters into your own hands and say, if you want this community to survive, this is what needs to be done?
That's what we're trying not to do.
I understand that.
You know, we even,
Survive. Excuse me a second. We want to survive. In the last 4 or 5 years, we've been able to put money back into
Correct.
fund balance at the end of the year, the general fund. And now we're at that zone, that comfort zone where it's like, okay, we're doing this, and now the values are starting to go up. So that comfort zone was there to say, you know what, we need the officers because we have an obligation to the community to get our police protection out there and not turn into other areas that are having situations going on, so that we could be proactive. So that step came in. We've done a few other things this year that we've not budgeted for, that's going to hope the values continue to rise, and we're gonna have that extra at the end of the year, so we're not going in the red that we were at one point.
Yep.
Excuse me, so does that help you to understand
The
how
general-
we were able to do that?
But the general public doesn't understand either a lot of the sacrifices that in-house the township were made so that that money could be put into a savings account so that we could put other.
We have one person
Tons of
doing
things.
2 people's full-time jobs.
Exactly.
People have taken on a lot of stress, and we're dealing with issues right now with what we've done to people.
you know, we
Excuse
even
me, to
talked
get
one,
to where we are.
we even talked at one point about not doing a police and fire, but doing a fire, trying to take us right out of the general fund. And now we wouldn't have these 2 big issues to deal with, we'd have one, and then that coming out of the general fund would now free that money up to take care of law enforcement. You know, we even kicked that around, would that be a better way to go so that we're not trying to explain 2 needs, we're just focusing on one, both wind up benefiting.
Even if this, one of these assessments would pass, 45 or 55, if the township is making some money or chief gets grants, we will lower that number. Sure. Period. Sure. Any way possible. It's not where we're sitting here gouging or just, you know, fat and sassy. Right. We're just trying to get something to make it, to make this township safe.
And as Pat said too, he's looking at the worst case scenario, so he's covering himself, because we don't want to put a public safety assessment out there and 3 years later say, boy, oh boy, we didn't think about that. Or something cost more than what we anticipated, so he's put out what he felt was fair.
All right, our job tonight is to try to give recommendation to the board what to do. The board needs to, we need to throw something at the board to say, okay, this is the direction. Before I go any further, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
What we're talking about tonight, if I'm out of line, you can just say, don't want to comment. What we're talking here around the table, are we out of line?
No.
Does this sound outrageous?
No,
Okay.
not at all.
All right.
That's what I want people to hear.
Okay.
Most
I
people
just want-
they don't think about it, they don't understand it, they don't know the details, they don't want to hear it either. They just want it done, one way or the other.
Thank you. I just had to ask that question. It was in my head, so I wanted to ask. Thank you.
The biggest concern for me is when you look at the numbers of government officials as far as how people feel about government. You know, understandably, a lot's going on, a lot of things not happening, whatever. So, you know, everybody in government lies, nobody tells the truth. You know, and it's so frustrating sitting here when you're trying to do the right thing, and you gather all the information you possibly can, and you move forward, and then you got a group of individuals like we did the last time, who, and Pat mentioned it, they literally went door to door telling lies, period.
Understand?
And it's so frustrating because if you look at the political races, the ads on TV right now, I mean, if you believed all the ads that you saw on TV, all those people ought to be in prison because they hate people, they hate kids, they hate mothers, they hate apple pie, you know. And that's why just people get turned off, it's understandable, you know. But, you know, we know what needs to be done.
Understand?
We know what needs to be done. We've not lied to people, we've been transparent, and we've been putting the truth out there all along. And we still are taking backlash for whatever may have happened 20, 30 years ago. And how do you get people to look past that?
I don't think
We still hear it today.
I don't think we're going to get past it all. I do think with what the board and what this township, the employees, the fire department, the police, everybody has done in the past 4 years is really, to me, is outstanding, and we're going in the right directions. That's for all boards, like I said, and all employees. And the people that are in the back, there's more people now stepping up and saying, hey, we're going somewhere, we're getting that way. But is it enough to push this over the edge?
Well, it's like I said, with the assessment, and we've discussed that, if a year, 2, 3 years down the road, we don't need as much money, I can speak as supervisor, and I think I can speak for the rest of the board, that we will in fact reduce the assessment.
Absolutely. No doubt,
And
100%.
we'll try everything possible to do that.
Agreed.
But we're politicians, and we all lie, and nobody wants to believe it, and you've got a group that'll scoff at that, oh yeah, right, all they'll want to do is get more money, you know, and it just, overcoming that kind of stuff, it just, I don't know how to do it,
I just think the important thing is that everyone is in position to try to do the right thing, just as you guys have been doing. And I think it's important to, as hard as this is, and I've seen it for the 13 years that I've been here, it's important to not give up. We just have to keep going. Heaven forbid, if
Yeah, no,
this
I-
assessment or both assessments fail, we need to keep doing the right thing, keep pushing forward, keep putting it out there.
This
I've
board
seen it-
will.
And I've seen it with different, talking with different departments, that it took them 3, 4, 5 times before they finally got their first millers through. And it's a matter of just keep putting it out there to the public, changing it, and tweaking it to what the public wants. But we just can't give up.
I think this time too, we're going to have a much greater, much better coordinated effort to go door to door. Make sure we're timing that. I don't think it'd be prudent for Chief and I to both go to the same door. It's going to take too much time, and there's going to be too much information. But if I know he's knocking on a door on Tuesday, maybe I knock on that door on Thursday. So the idea is still fresh, but they've had time to digest. I think last time we didn't have that, okay? In fact, not even all my guys went out last time. I think this time there has to be a really big push on the police side, the fire side, and even from you folks to make sure we're getting to some of those people. And doing it in a fashion that we're not overloading them on one visit. And I think, I believe we'll have that this time, but we didn't have it last time.
Yes, sir.
Based on everything we've heard and discussed tonight, my own personal recommendation is because of the 10-year and the 30-year deal, I would personally like to see renovations made to our fire department that is existing.
Okay. Is there a second on that? Okay, there's a first and there's a second. Okay, is there any discussion? Augie?
It was the point Rose brought up about the 10 years when you need to go again,
Yeah.
and you need to ask about equipment, then again on top of it, that scared me into, originally, before we came in tonight, I had my mind set up that I wanted a brand-new fire department, and this discussion tonight told me that the wisest way to get the money out of the taxpayers is to renovate what we have. That's, and no hard feelings, anybody can go 100% against me.
He's not gonna, you know, you got something.
It's just a tough decision. I mean, my true feeling is I think we need to build a fire station.
I'd love to see a new one too.
I'm with it right now.
But can we,
Happy to.
can we solve that? That's,
You have some people out there that would say though,
I mean,
well, I passed the millage 10 years ago and now you're asking me to pass another millage for what you asked me 10 years ago and it didn't pay for it? What? Huh? I don't understand.
well, that's what I've got. the issue.
That's my issue.
And it's the same amount of dollars, and.
They're not gonna
and
remember I talked to
Over
them 10
10
years
years, that if it's $55, 10 years from now, that will be about $50. Given inflation of today's dollars. And 20 years from now, it'll be less than that. Now, whether inflation will also require it to be more, you know what I'm saying? Just,
I'm supporting a new facility, but I'm trying to figure out where to go, what to do.
So then the option then to consider is, because in my opinion, when I look at the police department as well, there's needs there. So then maybe the option is we look at doing the minimum renovations to this building. Okay, doing the outside stuff to the brick veneer that needs to be done. Just doing the minimum and revisiting that. We don't have to take the hose tower down this year.
We have to revisit it, sir.
We do have to revisit it, but what my point is that maybe then we look at doing a different, do we then explore doing a bond? In other words, what I'm saying is,
I already
don't
have that.
pour every penny
Yeah. I already
into the
have that.
renovation the first year and then go, oh, man, you know what? We really need to look at a different
I
facility.
already have that in the back of my head for a building and ground meeting.
So,
It's sensible, Pat, from a business perspective, if it was my own dollar, I'd build a brand-new facility tomorrow, brand new. But I don't think we get the public to, I love your idea you just came up with put some patches on it and try and go about it a different way. I think maybe the people let us patch it up. But I don't think they'll go for a new one right now, even though dollar-wise, that makes the most sense to spend the money and build a new one. But that's just my opinion, Augie.
it's wise dollar, foolish, basically.
All right, I have a motion and I have a second. Any more questions?
What do you think, Darlene? Anything? No?
Well, I think it would be a hard sell for a new building. I think it should be a new building. I'm with you there. But I don't know that putting it out to the public that they would buy that.
Okay. All right, all in favor by saying aye?
Aye?
Aye. All right, any nays? Carries. All right, we'll give our recommendation to the board that we will pursue renovation on the existing fire department. We will have another board meeting and we will talk about what you have. Okay.
yeah, I think that's probably just a whole separate issue that
Yes.
facilities
We're
is
gonna-
something
we're
we
gonna do some
talk
digging.
about long-term,
Yep.
just do separately.
I agree. All right, move down. Old business, none. Okay, someone give a motion for adjournment?
Let's make a motion to adjourn the regular meeting of the Building and Grounds Committee.
Second? Jim will.
Oh, I will. I thought you just said second, sorry.
All
Yeah, I will.
all in
Support.
favor, saying aye, aye. We are now adjourned. Thank you. I know it's been long, but thank you very much.